Hello and welcome to Reboot, Reflect, Revive. Thank you for joining me today on my show where I interview many inspiring individuals who share their journey on how they face struggles and obstacles in life. Today, it is my great pleasure to welcome a woman of substance, Shirley Johnson. She is a fellow author who writes under the pen name of Orchid Bloom. She's a life coach, yoga instructor, wellness therapist, product designer, and recently written a book which is about her journey as a mother whose son has cancer. And the title of her book, interestingly, is Cancer, I Forgive You. Now, that's quite a powerful and impactful way of sharing her journey and her story. So I'm just going to read a little bit from one sentence from chapter 9, and then I will ask Shirley about it. So what she shares in chapter 9 is after she's been through so much of trauma of seeing her son suffer, she says, "You might be shocked by the statement not to take it personally. Yes, my son had a tumor the size of a golf ball in his little 18 months old head, and I chose not to take it personally. Why? Not taking it personally allowed myself to focus on him first. It was not a denial." Thank you, Shirley, for being here. It's amazing, and I'm so grateful that you made it today. I know you've been so busy, especially with Max, your young son's health, and so much happening in your life. But I just had to understand your mindset and what gave you that strength? What made you look within yourself to discover that strength that you have today to face your adversity?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And I'm very glad to make time for this important interview because of the work that you've been doing. I have seen, I've read your book. It's amazing, and I've seen your interview with other people, and it's really helped to bring out such a positive energy and powerful message to people from all walks of backgrounds and all nationality. So I'm really honored and grateful for this opportunity to share my experience and journey, and to whoever who will have a takeaway from this conversation.
Thank you, Shirley. Yes. So you speak about turning adversity into opportunity, suffering into healing. How did you find that strength? I mean, I'm quite impressed that you found that within yourself. How did it happen?
Well, I think it wasn't easy. It's actually took me months to actually tell people that my son had cancer. I didn't tell anyone because it happened 2 years around this time. It was before Christmas, and I was thinking, oh, I'm not going to tell people about this such a depressing news. So I didn't tell anyone unless people asked about my children and those who were really close to us. And even when I was telling someone what happened to Max, I couldn't say the C word. I just kept rambling on about how we found that he's so unwell, always tired, and went to see different doctors, and then realized that he had a tumor. But not once that I told people just, oh, Max has brain cancer. So it was a long time processing, and I was coaching myself. I sort of find it ironic because I started coaching around earlier in 2019, and then months later, my son had brain cancer. So I said, oh, ironic. Now, what are you going to do, right? So I think after that, I did one of the most important coaching is to coach myself and how to shift my mindset to really take myself out of the equation, because at that time I was very ignorant about cancer. I didn't really know anyone close to me. My friend, I had no friend, no family who had cancer. Everyone around me was very healthy. So it was a shock when the first person I encountered with cancer was my own blood.
Yeah.
So I was very, very ignorant. So it came as a shock. And there were many, many emotions. But at the same time, emotions aside, I had to make lots of medical decisions. And I found that if I mix up with my own emotion, I couldn't think or see things clearly. When my son couldn't express himself, and as parents, we have so many important medical decisions to make. So, and I felt very grateful and lucky that I went through those healing and training, that I could actually sit myself, calm myself down, and apply those skills and coach myself to shift the mindset and put everything I've learned on the table and see how I could detach myself and focus my son first. But I didn't really ignore my own emotions, because I knew very well that if I ignore the emotions, it will come back.
As a mother, it must have been a struggle to deal with it within yourself. Like sometimes, I mean, what I read from your book, you went through the phases of feeling why me, and then anger and bitterness, and like a whole spectrum of emotions that you experienced, plus a lot of difficult situations, like you said, decisions to make. And then also self-doubt. In some places you do mention a sense of self-doubt that creeped in. And that's when I noticed that you wrote about self-esteem, which is such an overlap with what I had shared in my book about self-esteem, but it resonated in the way you expressed it also in this situation, which is quite amazing also.
I probably didn't tell you the story because it was actually one of my best friends who asked me to write about my son's journey. And at that time I thought, my son's journey actually is not more special than anyone else's. So I really thought about what I would write about. And in the end, I hope the reader will be able to have a takeaway from my experience, whether it's cancer related or adversity related. And then I finished my manuscript around May. And then I sent to my editor, but somehow my editor got sick. So she took a break. And then your book came out. Your book came out, and then I came across your book, and it was like, oh my God. I don't know how it happened, because I finished my manuscript, but at the back of my mind, something was missing. Because chapter 9, it was a very important chapter after talking about what happened to Max and how I decided that I needed to stay happy. I needed to keep the family together. And then from chapter 10, I explained step by step how we could do that. So it was a transition, and I wrote about ego and self-esteem, and how this foundation, how this awareness to understand the difference would help us to move on, to open the door to what's coming next. And a lot of people have heard of the term low self-esteem, but very few understand what self-esteem really is. And then I came across your book. I said, oh my God. And I read it page after another, and I said, oh, this is perfect. I could finally sum up to one paragraph, few sentences, what self-esteem is.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe everything happens for a reason. If my editor wasn't sick, we wouldn't take a pause on the book. And I wouldn't have waited for your book to come out. And I came across your book. And that's why I finished the chapter with the summary of your definition on self-esteem. And I felt, oh, this is complete. I've now tied up all the loose ends, and I could easily lead my reader to what I'm going to talk about next, that they would understand what I'm talking about.
I like the way you mentioned about the difference between ego and self-esteem. I think you got that from another interesting speaker called Jay Shetty, where he explained the difference between, and I didn't know about it. So it was really nice to read the differences and how it's relevant in understanding where we as individuals sometimes put ourselves down simply because we might sound egotistical. But it's not ego, it's actually acknowledging that we have strengths and we have weaknesses, but it's acknowledging with humility. So there is this fine line where sometimes when we talk about ourselves or our accomplishments, then it sounds egotistical, but it coincides also with self-esteem as being respectful to the self and others. It's acknowledging that. So it was actually quite an eye-opener for me to understand this aspect of self-esteem, and I really appreciate that. But I also like the way you explained about the first step towards change is awareness, and the second step is acceptance. So I see there's a lot about what you share is to have the ability to accept our situation, or like what you have experienced, but it takes a lot of strength. Where do you get that strength from to accept? So, like in a sort of a spiritual sense, if you want to, how does it come about?
I think not only for me, probably for many people, for everyone, acceptance is probably one of the most difficult steps. I almost feel like the acceptance is like it's a locked door that you find it so hard to open. But once you unlock it, it opens up to a wide, like a new world that is full of opportunities, full of healing, and you can see, you can feel things that you couldn't see before when that door is closed. And it went back to what the most important topic and why you wrote the whole book about it, right? It's self-esteem and ego. I think for many people, and for me with Maxi, we question why me? Why such thing happened to me? We hear about people having cancer all the time. We hear about accidents happen all the time, but only when it happens to you or to someone really close to you, you question about why me.
Yes, it happens. Yeah. It happens. We hear that a lot. Like, why me? Why am I the one who had to face this situation? And when you get stuck in a why me scenario, it becomes like you feel like you become a victim. But when you acknowledge the why me into, okay, it's me. Now what do I do about it? Then you get, I guess that's when the strength comes up to, let me take this in small steps. Let me go step by step and then deal with the situation first, rather than deal with the inner flood of emotions that can happen, right? When you're in an overwhelming situation. So acceptance gives you that strength, I guess, to see things from a perspective that means you're looking at somebody else's needs first and then your own. Is that
Yeah.
what it is?
Yes, and your question about how the strength to accept came along. So it went back to why it's the understand to develop and understand the self-esteem is so important.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it is the ego which is working, then it's either this or that, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like a bungee jump. You either jump there and it's the stress.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get it right, then you hit it and then it's a disaster. But I think if you have a healthy self-esteem, it's almost like a measuring tape.
Mm-hmm.
You can stretch it and then you can adjust it to fit. It's almost like an internal measuring system that you can stretch it out and put it back to adjust to the circumstances. Because to accept is to accept that certain things can happen to anyone, but it doesn't mean that we need to change who we are, change our final goal, and we can adjust in between. So I think that is the big difference. To have the strength, we first need to understand, to aware, the self-esteem and the ego part. And that's why I think the topic that you cover, the reason why we need to talk about it today is so important, because that's where the strength comes from. We need to understand that. We need to understand to build that foundation before we can have that strength to unlock the door.
I like the way you explain that it's like a measuring tape. So that means you can stretch yourself to adapt to different situations. You can stretch your ability to face different, troubling moments or obstacles or struggles in life. So I like the way you say that it's a way that you can expand yourself, to open up, to be more accepting in a sense, but also knowing within yourself that you have the capacity to face the situation without falling apart. And there are people out there who have family members or themselves experiencing a health issue, even if it's cancer or not. How would you ask them to find that inner ability to face the situation? What advice would you give?
I think not only myself, because I also met many fellow parents whose children face the same illness that Max does. I think at the end of the day, probably the most practical or the easiest one to grab, to hold on, is try to think it's not about me, it's about him or it's about her. Why it's so important is if it's sometimes we forget about sometimes people have this misunderstanding that it's almost like I'm obliged to feel like this. It is, for example, I'm a mother whose son has brain cancer. He has an incurable disease. It's almost like I'm obliged to feel sad. I'm obliged to be heartbroken. and if people see me being happy, they probably someone will ask you, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Your son has brain cancer. So I think a lot of time people automatically go into, my family has this illness and I feel so sad and I'm supposed to feel sad and I shouldn't celebrate. I hear that a lot of time. Then I'm not in the mood to celebrate. I don't think I should
Is it guilt? Is something
it's
like guilt?
Yeah, exactly. It's the guilt that is talking. But if we take ourselves out of the equation, I focus on my son, and my son doesn't really think about himself being ill. Even his older sister, my daughter, she doesn't see her little brother as ill. She still thinks that he's the cutest boy in the world, even when he's lost all his hair, even eyebrow, and he looks so pale from chemo. And she still thought that, he's the cutest boy in the world. And that really struck me. That is not about me, because for them, all my son wanted to do, he just wanted to play and be happy.
Yes.
He didn't really think about he's sick, he's ill, even when he suffered lots of pain and discomfort during chemo. And he just still wanted to play and wanted to ask us for toys and this and that. And I think this is very important. And maybe it's harder to see it when, when it happens to someone who is a grown-up. Because when you're a grown-up, you already, have this experience and lost the sight of the innocence. But so for me, the easiest thing is to take myself out of the equation. It's not about me, and it's about him.
But I feel that also Max would want to see his mom happy. He would want to be seeing that mom is looking fine and cheerful and not, like feeling low. So I get the vibrations of that is also enables him to feel that, okay, I'm fine. I'm going through a little bit of whatever it is with the doctors, but I'm going to be fine because mom is smiling and dad is smiling and my sister's happy. So I guess that also makes a big difference for Max, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're very right. And sometimes it's just to change your perspective and to see things from, your family's shoe. And then you realize that actually they don't want to see you be miserable.
So how would you say that if somebody is struggling with a bit of self-esteem issues, and how would you advise somebody to strengthen themselves?
Well, I think I would go back to your book and how you describe what self-esteem is the difference between where we want to be, who we want to become, and compared to what and where we think we are, right? So that's the difference. The bigger the difference, the lower the self-esteem. So I think that's very important, and it's the easiest anchor to think about is where and how we want ourselves to be. And once we are really certain and fixate on that, we focus our energy on that.
With love and with
love and self-belief.
Yes.
And that we can be there. And we accept that there will be days that we are a bit further away. There will be days that we are closer, and we have the energy, we have the strength to be there. So we need to accept, have that kind of self-love, self-respect, self-belief that we can get there. But that where we want to be and who we want to become is a very important anchor. And we know that step by step, we get closer and closer day by day. And that will be how we can develop that self-esteem, even when it's very low. Now we know that step by step we can get there, because the goal is very clear and it's not moving, but we can be there step by step.
That's so nicely said. I mean, it's keeping up the hope and the belief in yourself that you can be, a happier person in terms of who you are, as you are, more accepting of yourself, so you can be accepting of everyone around you as well as situations. So on a final note, how would you like to, do you have any thoughts? Would you like to share something that would be helpful to all of us to learn from where you are and how you are progressing in your life as well? What are your goals, ambitions, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, well, my passion is to design, create beautiful things, because I came from a luxury retail background. And also another passion is to help people to heal. And I think if there's one thing that I really want to share with your audience and everyone who comes across this conversation, and also from my very own experience, is there is no happy ending with an unhappy journey.
So the journey is important to be comfortable with.
Yeah, so if we want to have a happy ending, we must enjoy the ride as best as we can.
That's beautiful.
Only that the journey will be a healing and meaningful one. And it's where we can see opportunity when things are bad, and where we can start to heal when we think all we have is suffering.
Yes, it's to find that light, that one sign, that one direction of where you can find some joy that you can bring to yourself or others. That's so lovely. I mean, if we cannot enjoy this one life and accept where we are and then be happy with it, I think then we are missing out on something beautiful as this one life. And I would request everybody who's interested in reading Shirley Johnson's book. It's available in Hong Kong at Bookazine, as well as online. Is it available online as well?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, on Kindle. Yeah, and also Audible audiobook.
Audiobook, wonderful. That's fabulous. And people can reach out to you through social media. Is that it?
Yes. And there's a website and email on the book as well.
Okay, super. Thank you so much, Shirley. It's been wonderful chatting with you and learning from you as well. Thank you so much for being on my show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thanks.